Boy, has it been a long time since my last slashers countdown. That was part 3. We did modern slashers. And slashers, that's my favorite subgenre of horror. So I couldn't wait to jump in the chair again and give you another top 10. So anyway, let's do top 10 greatest slasher movies part 4. What's up, guys? Welcome to another top 10. We did top 10 double features part 2 recently, I think a couple weeks ago. And I plan on doing this one. So finally getting to jump in the chair and do top 10 slashers part 4. Now, if you want to check out my previous 3 slasher top 10s, then by all means, I'll put a card right here for one of them. Or maybe I'll put like 3 cards spaced out so you can check out all 3 and it's easy access. But you're asking yourself, why is this part 4? Why are you doing? Well, a couple reasons. One, I mean, if out of all the slashers, and there's probably 1,000 of them, why would I only give you 10? Why am I holding 3 fingers up? I don't know. Also, I like to put newer slashers that I've seen along the way that I didn't get a chance to put in the previous countdowns. And there have been quite a few slashers that I've seen since part 3. So why not? You know, and it gives you guys some access to some slasher movies that you never even might have thought of. So I always get those in the comments. There's always a few of you that tell me, thanks to you, I have finally seen X movie. Not the movie X, but you know, just any slasher movie. But anyway, real quick, I'm going to give you 5 honorable mentions. First honorable mention is going to be Stage Fright. There will be some giallo slashers. I do believe giallos and slashers are pretty close in nature. And there'll be a few on here that are really on the nose slashers in my opinion. But Stage Fright is really fun. It's one of those one location type movies. You have this like production, this call it like a Broadway type production or something like that. Real killings start happening. And you know, just in true Italian horror fashion, you get a lot of the lighter shade of red. You know, there's a lot of bloodshed in these movies. There's a bit of like a quirky nature to them, and Stage Fright's just unique because of the premise itself. You know, like what would happen if real killings started happening in the middle of like a Broadway production? It would be really interesting, right? Next honorable mention is Tourist Trap. By the way, guys, Tourist Trap probably could have been easily in the top 5, top 10. It's that strong of a slasher movie, and it gets a lot of credit because it's PG, which is another countdown I'm going to be doing down the line. Top 10 PG or PG-13 horror movies. And one of you guys clued me in on that. I will be giving you a shout out and dedicating that video to you for sure. But Tourist Trap, Tanya Roberts, we lost her last year tragically, but this movie is unique because it is one of the scariest slasher movies, but yet there's very little blood, but it just has some really weird stuff going on in it. The director's from Texas, so you get a little bit of that, you know, that Texas flair, like kind of like Tobe Hooper. But also this movie has mannequins, and mannequins really freak me out. And the mannequins are probably the scariest part of this movie. I love the score. As a matter of fact, I have the vinyl back there. Yeah, look at that right here from Waxwork. It's a gorgeous freaking vinyl, and happy to have that. Happy to have that. All right, next honorable mention, Silent Rage, good action slasher with Chuck Norris. This is one of those movies I recently just revisited. I hadn't seen it since the 80s, you know, because back in the 80s, I used to watch a lot of like HBO, and a lot of these horror movies would come on late at night, and this is one of those, you know, that was irresistible. And I remember after watching it, I was like, this movie feels like it should be huge. Everybody should know about Silent Rage, right? Because it's just such a unique formula. Feels like a horror movie. And you got Chuck Norris kicking ass in it. And it's basically Chuck Norris versus Michael Myers. That's what the killer feels like. It feels like Michael Myers. Next honorable mention, I'm gonna go with something newer, The Rental. This was one of those movies that for some reason, a lot of people hated this movie. And I did not get it because I was just so consumed with these characters in this like Airbnb, which is a perfect setting for a horror movie. And I'm not gonna spoil anything in this countdown because I did get some complaints about spoilers in the first one. So I'm gonna be very careful about this one. But let me just say, very unique pacing in this movie in terms of a slasher, you know? Because normally in a slasher movie, there are strategically spaced kills throughout the movie. And this one's a little different. That's all I'm gonna say, but I loved the cast, I loved the setting, I loved the third act is freaking awesome. And yeah, I'm being very careful with my words on this one, but the rental for sure. And the last honorable mention is Just Before Dawn. Such a solid backwoods slasher. I freaking love this movie. The killer reveal is really interesting. It's got a good twist, but I love this movie for a few reasons. One, it's got some very memorable kills, okay? Especially two of the kills. And one of those kills ties into another reason why I love this movie, and that is the main final girl in this movie. As far as like a final girl arc, this might be one of the most effective arcs I've ever seen in a slasher movie. You know, she starts off one way, and then she's a completely different character by the end of the movie. You know, there's been something learned along the way. The events caused, I guess, whatever was inside her to come out. And I loved this character so much. Okay, top 10, here we go, top 10. Number 10, gonna go with a newer movie, Freaky. Came out a couple years ago from the creators of Happy Death Day, which I'm not a big fan of the Happy Death Day movies, especially the second one. I kind of hate the second one. First one's okay. This was a step in the right direction because, you know, I think the director heard a lot of complaints that some people had about Happy Death Day, not really feeling like a hard-edged horror movie. And this one was definitely, you know, balls to the wall. You had some really great kills, and, you know, they're presented pretty early on in the movie, so you know exactly what type of kills you're getting. But I like the premise too, how you had, you know, Vince Vaughn and this young actress, and they swap. You know, it's kind of like a Freaky Friday, but like a slasher version of it. So much fun to be had throughout. And Vince Vaughn, you know, his comedic timing is perfect for a movie like this, especially when he's playing a teenage girl, you can only imagine. Okay, number 9, 10 to Midnight. I've seen quite a few slasher movies, much more than just 15. This one definitely deserves a spot. I think 10 to Midnight might be one of the most underrated slasher movies I have ever seen. And anytime I get a chance to recommend it to people, I jump, because it's so unique, you know, because you got Charles Bronson in there, but also the killer is very memorable, and he kills all his victims naked. He's naked when he kills them. And just the performance of the killer is very unique, you know? He really goes for it, even though he's not that seasoned of an actor. Just a lot of great moments in this movie. I think the final act is amazing. You had a big group of young Hollywood starlets in this movie too that you're gonna notice along the way. I think this movie just checks all the boxes of what I want in a really effective slasher movie. And you know, it's set in the 80s, it's very bloody, it doesn't hold back at all. You get plenty of kills, you have a memorable killer, and then Charles Bronson is like icing on the cake. Number 8, staying on the 80s with Visiting Hours. Jason Nike gets credit for this one because he's the one that constantly would tell me, you need to check out Visiting Hours. You know, everybody loves a good hospital slasher, and this is definitely one of the best I've ever seen. Michael Ironside is downright terrifying. And it surprises me, and don't get me wrong, Michael Ironside, he's doing just fine. The guy's had a great career, but I think he should have even been bigger because of his performances in especially the 80s. Because he really owns this role, you know, as like this stalker after this television personality that kind of threw some shade at him, and he's not stopping, you know, he just wants to get to her. But just, you know, great cinematography, great production. This definitely feels like one of those A-level slashers that kind of went unnoticed. And maybe that's because when it came out, there were so many slashers that came out around it. Like if this movie would have came out maybe in like the late 80s when there was less coming out, I think it would have fared a lot better. But you know, I think a lot of great slashers, they just got lost in the shuffle of so many great ones that came out in the time period of the 80s. Number 7, I'm gonna go with Fear Street. I'm gonna go 78, even though I'm gonna technically say all 3 of the Fear Street movies, they have a kind of like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I really enjoyed the Fear Street trilogy. All of them were really fun, but I think 78 was the best, and I'm a little biased because it was set in a time period that I like the most out of slasher movies. But you know, this trilogy, you had a really good, interesting story, even though, you know, if you follow the books, to the letter of the law, then you might not like them that much. But I never read the books. I just loved this, you know, how all three of these stories kind of connected and intertwined with each other. Not an easy thing to do in movie format, you know, because you get 3 movies to tell the whole story. And I think it worked really well. I think they all tied together really well. I loved the killers. I think they had too many killers, and I could have another separate movie out of each killer. Like, what was her name? Ruby? It's been a while since I watched it. You'll let me know in the comments. But yeah, one of the killers especially. You know, I want them to come out with like a nice Blu-ray set of this trilogy. I'm sure you can get it on Stinky Tuna, but like an official one, I would love to get that. Number 6, let's piss some people off. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022. I don't get why people didn't like this movie, because there's a lot of people that didn't like it. And it's as far as like what you would look for in a 1, slasher movie, and 2, a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. I thought this fit both quite well. And if anything, it felt refreshing. You know, it didn't feel like the same tired formula that we get from a lot of those Texas movies. Kind of threw in a little bit of, you know, today's PC climate, but kind of changed it around a little bit. Went the opposite direction with a little bit. You know, putting 2 characters from different side of the tracks together. And at the beginning of the movie, you would think they're going to go one way with the story, you know, given the complaints that we hear about movies these days. But they didn't. They went the opposite direction. And people still complained because they're programmed. People these days are programmed, okay? That's another video. Leatherface was balls to the wall. And this might be the most badass Leatherface I've ever seen. Like, he did not hold back whatsoever. And you pretty much knew from the get in that ambulance. Number 5, X. I said X would make a place here. X is still my number 1 movie of this year. I love X so freaking much. And I just talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This one definitely feels like a combination of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre mixed with maybe like Boogie Nights. But just an irresistible script. Loved Ty West's direction in this. Can't wait for Pearl that comes out soon, which that'll probably be on Slashers Part 5. I just love how wacky and zany this movie got in the middle, and how you had like Jenna Ortega's character. You know, you really got into these characters and how she was seduced by that whole world, and then the effect that it had on her boyfriend. I was buying into all that stuff. I was really having a good time with this movie, and seeing how crazy and batshit it got in the end, as only Ty West can do. Number 4, freaking Tenebrae. I just got the 4K in from Synapse, and man, it is just absolutely beautiful. My last Drumbox video, I showed it off, but yeah, this is probably my favorite Giallo movie. And it definitely feels different than even most Giallos. It has a very unique flavor, and maybe that's because it came out in the 80s. I don't know. I did a revisited video on the movie a few months ago. Definitely check that out. But this is easily one of the most important movies in my collection. It's the score by 3/4 of Goblin. Okay, so that way you don't correct me in the comments, even though you will anyway. One of the most infectious scores I think I've ever heard, and it's not scary, but it just works. It's still. I made a mention of that, like how Italian horror, they get away with scores that aren't necessarily scary, but they still work for some reason because maybe they're just so damn catchy. I think what makes Tenebrae so effective too is just it's unpredictable with the killer, and it's got some crazy ass kills in the movie. You know, like they're shoving freaking papers of the book in the victim's mouth, that's right there on the cover. You know, attacks by a dog, and really I think one of the best like reveals, not just who the killer is, but also just the way the scene plays out. I mean, beautifully directed by Dario Argento. Probably one of my favorite sequences of his. Okay, number 3, Halloween Kills. They set out to give you a movie that is just a slasher on steroids. That's what you got, okay? You might be pissed off by some things that happened in this movie, some of the misdirection in the movie, the evil dies tonight, bullshit. But at the end of the day, guys, I've watched this movie so many damn times, and I end up liking it even more after I watch it. Every time, I just adore this movie so much. Didn't happen with Halloween 2018, but with Kills, there's something there. I don't know what it is, but I love this movie so much. I love the freaking flashback sequence. They took a character that I didn't like in the last movie, Karen, and made me like love her to death. Did I say love her to death? And the final act, you know, at the end of the day, what makes or breaks a great slasher movie is a kick-ass final act, and this gave me that. This was, I mean, if you don't like the scene, come here. If you don't like the freaking scene where Myers is playing Plinko with Cameron, and then he like walks down and he's basically psychologically torturing Allison and saying, "You dare me to do it? You dare?" Because that's what I'm gonna do. And then he freaking snaps his damn neck. I was like cheering in the theater, like, oh my! Not that I was like so happy that Cameron died, but just I was cheering because wow, that's some insane shit. This is a Myers that I've been waiting for forever. And man, did James Jude Courtney kick major fucking ass in Halloween Kills. No regrets and no regrets. Number 2, Killer Party, and I'm so freaking glad I found this movie. I think somebody shared it on Killerflix. I can't remember, but this is easily one of the most unique slashers, and it's one of those that I can't really tell you too much because I want you to go in and be surprised. Because let's just say though that it's kind of a blending of subgenres. I'll just say that. But you know, it has that fun 80s feel. It's a sorority slasher. You love the characters in this movie, but then it turns on its head at a certain point in the movie, and the final act is so freaking bonkers. And I was just like, wow. A movie that's 35 years old, and it's probably the most refreshing thing I've seen in a long time. So good that I put it at number 2 on this list, just so I could make you see it, okay? I'm making you see Killer Party. Number 1, what could number 1 be? Torso. I am so happy to put an Italian horror film as number 1. And it feels more like a slasher movie than any other Italian horror movie, just because I guess the way the killer looks. But, you know, this has all those tropes, I guess, that Italian horror movies are known for in the early 70s. Sergio Martino is quickly becoming one of my favorite directors. I don't think he directs anymore, but, you know, doing Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward and Torso and a bevy of other movies. But, man, I just love his style and how he doesn't pull back, okay? And take that for what you will. This movie is really excessive, okay? But I think a lot of Italian horror movies, especially from that time period, are excessive. But I just love it for the great characters and really just the nature of the kills, you know? It's got some pretty graphic kills in it. And you know what? I'm glad that I can put as number 1 a movie that probably a lot of you haven't seen that you need to check out immediately. Definitely get the Arrow release too. So good. So that's it, guys. My top 10 plus 5 honorable mention. Greatest Slashers Part 4. Let me know in the comments if you love any of these or if you haven't seen any of these. Looking forward to getting into the comments and discussing these films with you guys, okay? Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day. And on Fridays, we do Free for Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on all my socials. Support me on Patreon, buy me a coffee. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Drumdum out.